Good morning. Today I'm sorry I could not be here today too. Today we'll discuss some of the mass storage systems, mass storage technologies, such as disks and tapes, and what are the salient features of them and how they affect. Um, we will see how they affect our design in the future classes. So the primary secondary storage that we all use in our lives is the disk drive. Disk drives are part of your laptops and desktops and servers, and they essentially have a number of platters. Some are platters which look like a little CD, and they rotate fairly fast inside the enclosure. And there are disk heads which read the contents off of the platters. The disk heads can move back and forth so they can move um, along the platter. So this sort of looks like your old record player. So you can read on the outermost track and go all the way to the innermost track. And there are one track per platter. And a particular hard disk enclosure may have many platters. So you have many platters with a disk head, with as many disk heads, and the thing is rotating fairly fast. The rotation can be on the order of 70 to 250 times per second. Your iPod or some of those little disks are fairly slow, whereas your server disk can operate at speeds of about 15,000 RPM. And so the disk transfer rate tells you how fast you're able to take the contents from the disk and get it out of the drive. And positioning time tells you how soon you can read the contents of the disk. So essentially, since there's one head per platter, and so if the contents that has to be read is on the track or the circular stuff right under the head, then you need to wait for rotation latency. You need to wait for the disk to rotate such that the data that you want to read is right under the head. If it's not on the same track, your head has to move either towards the center or away from the center. So that time is called the seek time. It's a time to seek from whatever track you are to the track that you need to be. And rotation latency tells you how much time you need to wait for the data to spin up and come right under the head. So those two define how soon you can start reading. So if the data is not right under you, you have to wait for the head to move and then the disk to spin and come right under you. And since these disks are running fairly fast, a head crash can be catastrophic. Head crash is when the disk touches the medium, and that can be catastrophic. And this may be removable depending on how they're packaged and stuff. So if you buy one of those little the drives for laptops and stuff, the little compact flash, I have a picture in a couple more slides, and those things are removable, whereas the typical server disks are not removable unless there are hardware support and stuff. And the disks are connected through a number of different kinds of I/O buses. You might have heard of some of these. EIDE, ATA, and serial ATA are the buses of choice for desktop kind of systems. FireWire and USB hook up external hard disks, and fiber channel and SCSI are typically used in high performance servers. And a host controller in the computer usually talks to this controller and connects these storage with the operating systems. So here we have illustration of what I just said before about how these disks are organized. So essentially, in the illustration, you have three platters. The three disks, and each disk is made up of concentric circles. You have a virtual notion of a concentric circles, and each circle is called a track. So there's a track on the first platter on the top, the middle platter, and one in the bottom platter. And the head can move in and out. The head can move from the outermost track to the innermost track, and the disk is rotating around the spindle. The manufacturers define a notion of a sector, which is a segment of storage on the track. So typical numbers are 512 bytes. So you have every 512 byte um, sectors on the same track, and we define a notion of a cylinder which is all the tracks of the different platters. So a cylinder C would include track T on platter 1, platter 2, platter 3, and so on each track there are notion of sectors. So from a computer perspective, we want to use these things into a logical sequence of blocks. So we use some convention which basically states that all these sectors, so we start numbering from zeroth sector, zeroth block, which is the first sector in the first track of the outermost disk, right? And then you start numbering the different blocks on that particular platter, then the next one, then the next one of the same cylinder before moving on to the next track, and you start doing the same thing. So that's one way of linearizing the whole concept, right? So depending on where the blocks end up, you may have to seek, or you may have to move from track to track, or you may have to wait for the track to rotate to get under the disk head. And I picked up some of the pictures of disk drives off of the web. So essentially you have 3 different kinds of hard disk here opened up. The one on your right is the desktop disk. The one on the left side, left bottom, is a server disk, and the one on the top is a small disk which goes into the compact flash illustrated over in the middle. It's a 8.0 gig hard drive. So that goes into your photo, or the manufacturers may put that into a iPod kind of devices. So if you look at them, you can see the disk arm, which essentially is that the thing sticking out over the shiny platter, and you can see there are few platters in the it's more obvious on the server disk. I think you can see 4 platters, but essentially they all look the same. I mean, you have this circular thing with the arm sticking out, and different disks have different performance and reliability characteristics, but they all essentially operate on the same principle. And over here we have a close-up of the disk head, the one on the top left. The one on the top right is the different platters. The different platters are essentially glass platters with magnetic media coated on them. So that's how they look when you open it up. The one on the bottom shows what happens when you have a disk crash. So I'm not sure if you can see it, but if you look at it closely, you can see grooves etched into the storage media. And that's not a good thing. I mean, you want to read the magnetic data, not actually plow into the medium. And in this particular case, the disk looks so dirty. I'm not sure why anyone even started it. But you see something like that, and that's usually catastrophic. So, like I said before, the disk drives are have the notion of the tracks and sectors and so forth. We consider them as a logical blocks for the operating system. We number them as sector 0, the first sector of the first track of the outermost cylinder. We start them as block 0 and then go on from there. It's important to note that the sectors and blocks need not be the same, right? So when you format your hard disk, your operating system will let you choose the block size you want, and I think typical default values are 4K, right? So most of the operating systems would tend to use a block number of 4K. The disk sectors are in 512 bytes. So you cannot have blocks less than 512 bytes, but you can have in multiples of 512 bytes. So essentially the operating system treats a number of consecutive sectors as one block. So the higher the blocks, the more internal fragmentation you would notice. But the good side is the more blocks you have. So the more sectors you have per block, then you avoid the seek time. So essentially, once you do the seek and rotation latency, you get to read a whole bunch of stuff, right? So that's a trade-off, and depending, so that's a parameter that you would have to set when you initialize a new hard disk. Many of you may not remember doing that for a hard disk, but you most definitely would remember doing that, or easier to do that for sort of like your floppy disk or what have you, right? Because you can erase them and reformat them fairly quickly. And so the next most popular storage media, secondary storage media, is the magnetic tape. And magnetic tape holds large quantities of data, and its access time is slow. And essentially, magnetic tape is sort of like your VCR tape or cassette tapes, or 8-inch tapes, or whatever. So you have a magnetic media set on two spools, and it goes from one spool to the other spool, and so if you remember from a VCR tape, VCR tape or cassette tape, one of those things. So if you're on the beginning of the tape and you want to watch or view something at the end of the tape, you essentially have to fast forward. So you have to stop what you're doing, fast forward to the end. You may or may not be able to exactly come to the point where you want. So you kind of reach earlier than that to kind of play slowly, what have you, right? So it takes a while for you to seek, which is much slower than what you have in disk. And if you who used the iPods, notice that you can just go randomly to any song, whereas if you're using a cassette tape, you have to do this slow sleek and stuff. So it's not typically used as a main file system. It's used more as a backup media, essentially because you have a lot of capacity and it's fairly cheap. But once you have the head right where you want to read, the transfer rate could be comparable to a disk. So the access time to start reading the content that you want is slow, but once you're there, there's no reason for the transfer rate itself to be slow. So once you start to send the data through, things can be fast. And the capacity depends on the different technology. There are a whole bunch of technologies. So I have a picture of a couple of tapes, and as you can see, there are essentially two spools and tape. You can see the dark tape going from one to the other, and it looks very similar to audio cassette tape or what have you, right? And in terms of the operations that are supported by a tape drive, it differs from what you can do with the disk, because essentially you have to locate, you have to seek to the right location where you want to read the contents, and then you can figure out where you are, and you can kind of move back and forth from where you are. And the operations that are supported by tapes are append-only medium. So essentially, when you start writing from some location, you overwrite the contents underneath you, right? And there is no easy way to stop at some exact spot, so you don't have a notion of sectors and what have you. So after you're done writing, you mark an end of the tape by using a EOT marker. So essentially, if you rewind halfway through, start writing, you overwrite everything on the tape from then towards the end. And this is very similar to your VCR tape, where if you start rewriting something, even after you stop, there's still little bit of information is lost. And so the application interface, most operating systems treat the disk, in a certain way. I mean, they treat them as a raw hard disk or raw storage or a file system, whereas tapes are different. Tapes are, it's not easy to create a notion of a file system. So what the operating system does is it gives it gives the whole tape as a raw medium to an application. So typically you have a backup program which takes the whole tape, rewrites it, or creates whatever it wants with it, and only it's able to read the tape. So when it wants to read the tape, it has to have exclusive access and reads the tape. So no other application may or may not be able to read the contents, but that's okay. Tapes are rarely used as a file system. They're used exclusively, specifically to a particular application. And there are other storage technologies, and their primary characteristics is they're cheaper. And they're cheaper because they are removable, so you're able to amortize the cost of the drive for a number of different uses. So for example, you may have one of the examples is a floppy drive or a CD burner, right? The cost of the CD burner itself may be as much as a disk, but with a CD burner you can essentially burn any number of CDs. So essentially you have a much larger storage capacity than what you have with the hard disk, with the caveat that you have to keep moving, you have to keep putting the disk back and forth, but that's a little price to pay for what these things can do. So some other examples are floppies and CD-ROMs, etc. So let's look at the case of the first removable disk, which is the floppy drive, right? Some of you may have never seen floppy disks because they are kind of on their way out. They're essentially like the magnetic patterns you have inside hard disk, inside a sleeve. So they may be as fast, but they're less reliable because they're liable for damage much more than a hard disk. I mean, you're much more likely to bend your floppy disk than something which is inside your laptop or what have you. And we have notions of magneto-optic disk, which behaves sort of like magnetic and optic, and also optical disks, your burnable CD-ROMs, CD, CDR, CD, RW, and all those things, which are essentially operate on different mechanisms to imprint your data onto the storage medium. We also have a notion of worm disk. Worm disks are write once, many times, read many times, and some of the popular examples are the CD-ROM or DVDs. The company burns the songs or a movie onto a CD or DVD, ships them to you, so you essentially can play them as many times as you want. But once it's returned, that's that, right? So many of the devices, the OS gives abstraction of a file system or as a raw device where the application can use it in whichever form it wants. But certain technologies like tape devices, it only gives a raw device interface, and it's up to the backup mechanism to create a visual effect of a file system. And naming is another issue where the storage media have create new problems. So if you remember, in typical operating systems, you have a certain naming. So for example, a file may be called /etc/password, and that's consistently on the same basis. So however, if you have a CD-ROM, depending on where it gets mounted, and the mounting depends on the operating system, the same name may appear in different locations on different machines, right? So many of you may have burnt a CD on your Windows PC and you're trying to take it to a Linux machine. They don't all appear at the same location, right? It may appear as E drive on Windows machine, it may appear as volumes under Macintosh OS. So depending on where they are, the naming may look different, right? And the OSs don't make any effort to keep the names the same. For the most part, it's fine because we learned to live with that, learned to kind of know that the drives are mounted on a different space on different machines, and then look into through the space. But that's still a problem for applications which may want them to be uniform across different machines. The other aspect of these different storage technologies is the speed. And the speed we define using two mechanisms. One is the bandwidth, and another one is the latency, right? Bandwidth is the amount of data that you can get after you've done the latency part. So essentially, once you start to read or once you start to write, how much data can you send in and out? And there are two different ways of saying that. One is a sustained bandwidth and one is the effective bandwidth. A sustained bandwidth tells you how much you can actually read or write once you start going. Effective bandwidth also considers the seek and locate, right? And seek and locate are part of the latency process. So which states that once I make a request to say read, how soon do I get the first byte out, right? And that depends on if it's a disk, what's the rotational latency, what's the seek, where the head moves and all those things. For a tape, that may involve rewinding the tape, fast forwarding the tape, what have you. So depending on the technology, there are some things which happen, and before you can start to use the media, that's the latency part. And once you pay the latency, bandwidth tells you how much you can get data after that part, right? And reliability is another mechanism which are affected by these technologies. So typically hard disks are more reliable than tapes, and optical media is more reliable than magnetic media, because magnetic media can be demagnetized by strong magnets. Optical media will survive, right? So if you used a cassette tape and you waved a magnetic something on top of a cassette tape, you notice that your sound quality degrades. It's not that easy to do that. You can't do that with the CD. Of course you can scratch it, but that's a different ball game, right? And head crash is a big deal, and it's usually catastrophic. It's catastrophic even for CDs. I'm sure some of you have CDs which are scratched. So when it comes to the scratched part, that part of the song or movie is lost. In the hard disk case, if it's so bad, it may not be able to do anything else. So the whole disk has to be thrown out. Right? And with regard to cost, main memory typically is the cheapest option, and the cost kind of it becomes cheaper with the secondary to the tertiary. So hard disks are more expensive than tapes, and tapes are more expensive than the other forms you can think of. So in the case of a removable media, the cost actually goes down with the number of cartridges, number of stuff. So you pay fixed cost for the drive, but then you amortize it by having lots of cheap tapes going through the system, right? And your book has a few graphs which show the price per megabyte for main memory. It's in the dollars per megabyte range, and hard disks which are pennies per megabyte. In fact, right now you can buy a 250 gig hard drive for about $70 retail, from the store, which I think works at like 30 or 35 cents to a gigabyte. It's fairly cheap, and tapes are even cheaper. But I think at this point the cost of the hard disk has come down enough that people can use hard disk as their primary data backup mechanism. Some of the research is trying to use that. Instead of using a tape, using hard disk as a backup mechanism, because their cost is cheap enough and they have the ability to do a random seek. So those are the technologies that we looked at, where the storage media is attached to the operating system, and the operating system either creates a file system or what have you. There are two more advanced technologies that are out there. The first is the network attached storage. Here essentially you have the storage in a box, and it presents itself to the rest of the world as a distributed, as a network file system, right? So for some of the example where how it shows up as NFS, CIFS, which is what Windows file system is, or as AFS. In fact, Notre Dame we have a network appliance, NAS, network attached storage from network appliance company, which shows up as a AFS storage. So essentially there are a bunch of hard disks, and the storage itself behaves like a file system, right? It doesn't provide a raw storage, it provides a file system. And there are also iSCSI protocol, which is essentially a SCSI, which is a server, like we saw up in the beginning of the slides, a SCSI way of connecting hard disk to the main machine, except it goes over the network, right? So this is one way of organizing the storage. The other way is through what is called storage area network. So essentially what happens here is, Storage area network is, think of it as a large cluster with lots of hard disk. So there's a rack full of hard disk, and the storage area network will do something so that it presents it, uh, you know, a raw storage to a server. So, for example, assume a rack with 200 hard disks, right? And it's hooked up to two servers. So, there's a SAN manager which can be configured to say, take 150 hard disks and present them to server 1. Take the rest of 50 hard disks and present them as a hard disk to server 2, right? So essentially, the storage area network would kind of mix, combine all the 150 disks and make them look like one large disk to the server. And it appears as a raw disk, so server has to create a file system on top of it, right? So in this case, the server does not know where this content is stored. So it may be in what disk 1 or disk 2. So all the rotation latency and all those things are lost. And the SAN manager can be smart. It can move stuff back and forth to a tape library. You can do backups of stuff on the back. But the important thing to remember is, from the server perspective, it looks like you have one humongous hard disk. You don't know that there is all this, different hard disks involved, except for the timing, right? Whereas in the NAS case, the storage looks like a file server, right? It looks like usable to application, to clients, and what have you. And this is very popular in large data center where it has a lot of nice properties. So for example, the SAN manager can implement automatic backups, or when a disk fails, it can add new disks or change the storage size, sort of stuff that you can't really do with the real hard drive, right? And that brings up to the notion of a hierarchical storage management, where the idea here is, now that we have talked about a disk, hard disk and tape drives and other mechanisms, right? So if you can kind of mix all of them to get the best of everything. Hard disks have good random access, they're more expensive. Tape drives don't have good random access, but they are, they have good bandwidth once you start using them. But the tape drives can also be archived. They can be moved off the media and put somewhere. So if you have a robotic mechanism which can load a new tape and then start using them whenever you demand them, right? With the notion of hierarchical storage management is, you have a storage mechanism where the stuff that you use more often would be in the hard disk. If it gets cold, if it's not used for a while, it's moved from the hard disk onto the tapes, which are then moved off to the into the tape archive somewhere. So if you ask for a content which is not being used for a while, then the loader may physically, the robotic loader goes through the tapes, figures out the tape that you want, loads them into the tape unit, right, and then spools them and all those things, and then starts to read the contents off of that, puts them into a hard disk, and lets you go. So in that case, the latency may be quite high. It may take you a while to actually get the physical tape and all those things, but once it's loaded, it's pretty fast. Essentially you're reading from the hard disk, right? And these are used for supercomputing clusters and large installations. So if you're having data, for example, for the last 50 years of scientific observation, then you may have extremely large amounts of data. So you don't really care about waiting for, say, 5 minutes to get the content that you want, because it's essentially all online. So that kind of wraps up this chapter. So essentially we looked at 3 different class of storage media, sort of the random access storage media such as hard disk, and sequential access media like tapes, and media where the tapes are removable, sort of like your CD-ROMs and stuff, and some ways of how you may use that. In the next chapters, we'll try to see how we can use these to build other stuff. And actually, on Friday, I'll talk something about disk scheduling for the disk head for the particular disk, and those will be useful for your homework project. So I'll see you guys on Friday. So if you have any questions, please talk to Chris over here, or we'll continue on Friday. Right. Thanks. Bye.